Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 10 glitch in the matrix and supernatural stories for you. We start with a quiet cottage in the Ottawa Valley, where a young girl would experience the impossible. Case file number 2426, written by Iggy. A test, a twin, or a trick of the mind. This happened to me years ago when I was maybe 17. I told my family and a few friends, but never thought to post about it until now. For context, it all happened in the Ottawa Valley in Ontario, Canada. Leading up to the big event, I had been experiencing some pretty heavy déjà vu. It had been off and on for years, but for the past couple of months, it became daily. The day it happened was a Sunday, and we were packing up the cottage to go home. It was getting ready to rain, so the sky was dark and cloudy. Most of the other campers had already left the park, so it was like a ghost town. I decided to take my dog for a little walk down to the lake before we leave. Nothing feels off, other than a bit of worry I might get caught in a downpour. I take him to the lake, maybe a 5-minute walk, and let him swim for a few minutes. When I decided it's time to head back, I turn, and my youngest sister runs out in front of me. She was maybe 8 or 9, too young to be running around a trailer park alone. She was dressed in the same clothing as my sister that day, an old hand-me-down shirt. Being a brooding teen, I yell at her to get back to the cottage. This kid said nothing, gave me a sickly sweet smile, and ran off. There was another cottage beside me, so I couldn't see her leave towards ours. I think nothing of it, letting my dog finish sniffing before leaving myself. I left maybe a minute later, and there was a soccer field between the lake and our cottage. If she went back, I should have seen her running across the field, but I assume she ran fast. I get back and tell my parents my sister had been running around the park alone. She was sitting on the couch doing a puzzle, glaring at me. She was also doing the puzzle when I left, but I didn't notice at the time. My dad, 5 feet away doing dishes, said he hadn't seen her move the entire time. My mother, collecting laundry, confirmed this. Even running, the journey to the lake would take a couple minutes. She stopped to look at me, then ran back, but she wasn't out of breath when I returned. If she ran back and sat down, she'd be huffing and puffing, and my dad would have noticed. Some say it was a kid who looked similar, but it was her exact clothing and features. Or maybe your parents didn't notice, but it's hard to miss a child missing or returning. She was out of shape, so running would leave her breathless, yet she looked fine. After this, all that déjà vu stopped completely for about 3 years. It's now coming back, but only every couple months if that. It's been haunting me, like what if I followed her, or was kind instead of yelling? I often think of the yelling as a big regret, a turning point in my teen years. Looking back, it kinda seems like a test, as the weird phenomena stopped after. Thinking of it as a test is interesting, much like the Lady of the Lake guarding Excalibur. So what was this guarding? Case file number 2427, written by Tivani, The Wolf on My Bed. The most unexplainable thing that happened to me was definitely when I was a kid. I used to sleep in a big bed between my dad and my older sister, and I'm laying with my legs bent to the side, facing up, and my dad said to put the covers over my head and go to sleep. Being a rambunctious, definitely not sleepy little kid, I started messing around, moving the sheet up and down over my head, thinking I was such a little rebel, I wasn't going to fall asleep yet. Until I pulled the covers down one more time and see a dog standing on the bed, growling down at me. I can feel its feet over the top of my legs where they're bent to the side too. I was terrified of wolves at the time, and this is what I thought it was. So I put the covers back over my head and very, very slowly slid my legs out from underneath this thing. The only solution I had was to go to hell to sleep. The dog or wolf or whatever it was didn't bother me after that, and I clocked out in good time. Doesn't make any sense because we didn't own a dog at the time, and it didn't wake my dad or my sister at all. My antics were one thing, but the fact that a dog, growling, didn't bother them, but I heard and saw and felt this thing as real as life was just nothing I can begin to explain. Never had anything like it since. Dad's had stories of having a telepathic connection with my mom, had a prophetic vision that helped change our futures, and my sister's had what we can only guess is a form of clairaudience. But those aren't my stories, and this is the only one I really have. But it's unexplainable. Case file number 2428, written by Absolute Grief. Pudding Pop takes a leap of faith. Last night, my wife and I were going to sleep a few minutes past midnight. We have no kids, no pets. We are the only people in the house. We had washed our bed sheets and duvet earlier in the evening, and I put the fresh bedding on right before bed. My wife has a stuffed animal possum from when she was younger, named Pudding Pop. He usually is just plopped down at the end of the bed, or sometimes down on the floor when he rolls off the bed. Occasionally, she'll cuddle up with it when we're going to sleep. While falling asleep, we're laying there talking. I'm spooning her with my arm over her, with my arm and head the only parts of my body outside of the covers. As our conversation is trailing off, as we're getting sleepy, I say something like, "Where's Pudding Pop? Did we put him back on the bed after making it?" She just responds she isn't sure, and then we're quiet for a few minutes. Maybe 3 minutes go by, and Pudding Pop suddenly lands on my arm, which is slung over my wife, as we're all cuddled up. He's stuffed with the material inside Beanie Babies, and he makes the distinct plop sound, like if you were to drop a Beanie Baby down on the table. A very audible sound. Our eyes both shoot open immediately. Did you just drop Pudding Pop down on me somehow? No, how could I have? She responds. She was completely under the covers other than her head. She is immediately freaked out. The stuffed animal came down on me hard enough for her to feel it through the covers and to jolt us both up. We have no bedside table by the bed, nothing at all that he could have fallen off of. Our bed is essentially just against the wall in the middle of the room. I have no real explanation of where he came from, how he dropped down on top of us, or anything. Very bizarre, and I found it very hard to fall asleep for the next hour. For only an hour after that. I probably wouldn't get any sleep at all the entire night, at least. Case file number 2429, written by Scorpio Ogre. La Llorona wanted my burger, and maybe my soul. I grew up in the state, New Mexico. This place has always had more than its fair share of spooky stuff, from Roswell to Route 66, name now changed. It wouldn't be hard to find someone who had an encounter of sorts. So growing up, I lived with my mother and my babysitter in a place called the South Valley. The reasons for this and the subsequent events that followed are another horror story unto itself. The babysitter had her 2 adult kids and 3 grandkids there too. One of them was named Dustin. Now this guy was a metalhead in all senses of the word. We're talking 80s Iron Maiden, Metallica, all the big names are fresh to the scene. Bullying and fights for being a metalhead was an everyday occurrence for this dude. May seem unimportant, but this dude wasn't scared of crap. I was 10 or 11 at the time. We'd go out and get food from the local fast food joints nearby regularly. Our road went right over an old mud arroyo, ditch. You could just continue straight or walk along the dirt path besides the arroyo. This path would lead back to the backside of Burger King and besides the landlord's house. Unless we really wanted Burger King, we'd avoid this route for 2 reasons. 1, because the landlord was always watching out of his window. And 2, due there being a small irrigation bridge for the family down the road, you could walk on the bridge if you wanted to. It was just a foot in front of a foot while holding onto the rail. That was the kind of walk it was. Slip and you'll go in. One night we wanted Burger King, so we went. It's about 9:40-ish p.m. He wanted to go at closing because they'd hook us up with more food. With him being my senior by 7 years, I figured he knew what was best. We got our food, 2 bags each, and decided to go back via the bridge path since it was shorter. Now in the valley, we'd get blue moons, a full moon that made the whole place look blue. That night was one. Dustin crossed first, then me. He was about 5 feet ahead of me. We heard something splash, and he turned to look if it was me. I see him go white, full-fledged panic mode. All he says is, "Run!" Then he drops the food and bolts. The South Valley was known to be a rough area. I figured he'd seen someone behind me that was going to mug us or something. I hurry, my foot slips in the water. I regain myself and get on the dirt path, running to catch him. I'm about where he was initially when I turn back to look. All I can see is a bright white light on the bridge. Now I know it ain't no bicycle, nor can it be someone with a flashlight, too steady and fast. My turn to drop food and run like hell. I catch up to Dustin and we get inside the house. I dive on the couch in the living room and he goes to his room. About 10 minutes later, someone is pounding on the door. I'm freaking out. The oldest kid goes and answers it. The landlord, Ray, is standing there in his underwear, angry as can be. He swears that Dustin was looking in his bedroom window. He knows it was him because the person had long hair. He goes on to say he was holding a flashlight to illuminate himself, so he could try and scare Ray and his wife by moaning and crying. Ryan, oldest kid, said he'd deal with it. Closed door and said, "What the hell do you guys do?" Tried to explain. He just said, "Ditch witch, la Llorona almost got you." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Never walked that bridge again. So that's it. I know it's a hell of a read. For anybody curious about the location, on Google Maps, you want the intersection of Tobacco Road and Isleta Boulevard in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Head east up Tobacco. About halfway there is the Arroyo on both sides. The bridge side is to your left if you're facing east. Not the absolute clearest shot, but you can see what I described. Well, if you're ever running away from something, and you're so terrified that you drop your food, well, that's when I know, that's when it hits me very hard, because dropping food, whoa. Case file number 2430, written by Dreaming with Jeff. I thought he was just another guest. When I was younger, my parents used to host family gatherings around the holidays. It was all sorts of extended family, as well as the immediate family. It wasn't really uncommon for people that I had never met to show up. When I was like 6 or 7, I remember noticing this guy for the first time. He looked like he was close to my dad's age, which would have made him close to 50, if not 50-something. He was pretty short and kind of stocky, and he had these thick frames 50s-style glasses. Even as a kid, I noticed this guy never seemed to engage with anyone. He kind of just ambled around and smiled, like he was taking everything in and appreciated the gathering. I remember being really comforted by his presence for some reason. He kept showing up after that from time to time, but I still don't remember him talking to anyone. Though I do have a vague memory of him sitting with my dad and granddad on the couch, while the two of them talked, and the guy smiled at me. Around the time I was 10, we stopped having those sorts of gatherings because of some financial issues. I'd kind of forgotten about the guy until I turned 18 and was getting ready to graduate high school. I asked my dad if he would mind inviting some of the extended family to my graduation, and for some reason I brought up the guy. My dad looked puzzled. When he asked me who I meant, I gave him a brief description, and he turned white. He grabbed a photo album and showed me a picture and asked me if this was who I was talking about. I said, Yeah, that's him. And my dad started freaking out. The picture was of my great-grandfather, who died in the mid-60s. I don't know exactly what happened, but my parents and grandparents are convinced I saw his ghost coming to visit to check up on the family. I'm not really a believer in the supernatural, but I don't really have a solid excuse for this story, unless maybe I dreamt parts of it. I don't think it was a dream. Case file number 2431, written by DebZone1, The Human GPS. I've had a few experiences where I was going to an unknown place and ended up where I needed to be. These were both way before GPS and cell phones. One was pretty basic. Not spooky, but cool. My mom and I are driving from Kansas to Edmond, Oklahoma. Neither of us had ever been there. We got to a sign that says the next however many exits were Edmond. I said, "It's this one," and took one. Then I made a few turns, and there was her apartment complex. We drove right to her door with no directions. The second was even cooler. I was 16 when my mom decided she wanted to find her older brother, who she hadn't seen for over a decade. He traveled with a carnival, had done so for about 30 years. My mom invites her sister, and we set off for his last known address, which was just Andalusia, Alabama. We're traveling again from Kansas, and we got maps from AAA. This is 1977. We set out, and about 6 hours into the drive it becomes clear that 16-year-old me is going to be the sole driver and navigator. We spend the night somewhere, Kentucky I think, and we get to Alabama the next night. By the time we get to this small city, it is pouring down rain and pitch black. And remember, we have no address other than Andalusia. My mom and aunt say, "It's up to you, honey." And I say, "We're going this way." And soon pull up in the pouring rain to a mostly dark building, which turns out to be a bed and breakfast. We tell the lady, the owner it turns out, about our quest, and she says, "I know Bill, but he and his family moved to Florida about 6 weeks ago. I'll see if I can get some more information in the morning." In the morning, she got us an address from somebody. It was in Bradenton, Florida, which was another 16-hour drive. My mom and I looked at each other, and she said, "Might as well," and so we did. I've always been thankful for whatever guided me to that lady, who randomly knew my Uncle Bill, the carnival mechanic. That is so cool, and no pressure, right? When your mom and aunt say it's all on you. The great celestial navigator. You're like the navigators in Warhammer 40k. You have the third eye. Just remember your Gellerfield. Case file number 2432, written by Anonymous. Cigarette ashes and cold chills. My grandmother, who I was very close with, passed away in September of 2017. She lived just outside a small Texas town on 5 acres of land, a very rural area in general. While my family was dealing with probating her will and disbursing the estate, I stayed overnight at her house on several occasions by myself. This was a place that is very clear to me, and I wanted to have as much time with it before my family did away with it. On this given occasion, I arrived after the sun had set. I unlocked the doors, walked in the house, and turned on the lights like I normally would. This time was different, though. I was immediately hit with an overwhelming feeling that something was wrong, and there was some sort of presence I was sensing, a literal sixth sense moment. I just knew I was not alone, and I cannot explain it any other way. I could feel it in my bones. I was very uneasy, and I am typically not a chicken crab. I had stayed out there all by myself on plenty of occasions in the pitch black night, but I never felt this way. It was a feeling of utter fright that I haven't experienced since. And of all the times I did not have a firearm with me, it was this one. Either way, I decided to get the hell out of there after being there for maybe 10 minutes, as the feeling of fright would not subside. Nonetheless, nothing escalated past what I was feeling. This occurred on a Saturday. My father called me the following Monday to verify that I had been at the house over the weekend, because our realtor had come to the property that Monday morning to prep for a showing and found cigarette ashes all over the kitchen counters. I know for a fact there was no cigarette ash on the counters when I was there. Additionally, nobody in our extended family smoked, so even if someone had stopped by in the meantime, the ashes wouldn't be from someone we knew. I am nearly certain I was not alone in that house. Whether the presence was from a physical human or my grandmother trying to communicate with me from another dimension is up for debate. I am a believer in the supernatural, and I'm sure people have communicated with dead loved ones. However, the cigarette ashes tend to have me think it is the former. I'm just glad I trusted my gut and got the hell out of there. I never stepped foot inside that house again. Yeah, it probably was a human being, but keep in mind, spirits have been known to physically materialize stuff, real matter, like money, or even water droplets. So, ashes? Not impossible. Case file number 2433, written by Iggy. Aisle by aisle, we searched. So back during COVID, maybe 2022, I was with my family on our bi-weekly grocery trip. We live a half hour from town, so we make a night of shopping, out for dinner and all that. Anyway, we were at our last stop of the night, Walmart. My mom always takes her time in the produce section, so my 16-year-old sister and I decide to look at the clothing. We stay there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes and realize we still haven't seen our parents come to the cash. We'd be able to see this as the clothing section is right in front of the cash in this location. We decided to find them and see how much longer they'll be, as we're both getting tired of shopping. So we go to the produce section, where they should be. We don't find them, so we backtrack through the aisles, thinking they forgot something. This normally works, it's a big store, but we know it by heart since I was a baby. We do a full lap around the store and turn up without them. There aren't that many people in the store because of how late it is, so we should have no problem picking them out. We start our second lap. Maybe they were in between the aisles and we missed them the first time, right? Well, then we start to notice foreign language. People around us are speaking something other than English. This is super uncommon for the area. It's a small town and not many tourists stop there. We started noticing that not a single person was speaking English. Every person, every family we passed was speaking something we didn't understand. So as we walk, my sister and I are nervously joking about not understanding anyone. We complete a second lap, and by this point, we're getting worried they've already left the store. But as we near the produce section for the third time, we finally find them. They were basically where we left them originally. We ran up to them, happy to see familiar faces, saying how we couldn't find them before. Well, my mom says they've been in the produce section the entire time. I swear we checked the damn produce section twice and they were not there before. Even weirder, once we found them, it seemed like everyone started speaking English again. I didn't hear another foreign language that night. So either my parents and youngest sister are really good at hiding in plain sight, and there was some foreign tour bus that pulled into the small town Walmart at 10 p.m., or something weird happened. Yeah, intersection with a different universe is my guess, one that's quite far away, where the dominant language in that area is not English. Case file number 2434, written by B. Santa. The Key, the Ghost, and Two Dumb Kids. When I was around 10, I spent a lot of time at my friend's house. It was an older townhome built in the late 1800s, and pretty much every door had those old knobs and skeleton key locks. All of the original keys had been lost as far as we knew, so we never cared about them. We were playing hide and seek one night during a sleepover, and I hid in the basement, behind the old water heater. This was in a small cubby space, besides the stairs. We used to spend a lot of time in that little space because, unfortunately, her mother was an alcoholic, and would get into violent fights with her boyfriend while we were home. It was our favorite hiding place. While I sat back there waiting to be found, I saw something poking out from under a piece of broken wall panel and pulled it out. It was an old skeleton key. We stopped our game and immediately set out to find whatever it unlocked. It didn't work on any of the doors in the house, so we tucked it away into our trinket box and went to bed. That night, neither of us slept well. We both had nightmares, and she swore up and down that she saw someone sitting in her rocking chair when she woke up in the middle of the night. The house was haunted as hell anyway. I have tons of stories from that place. But things seemed completely different that night. We were dumb kids, so we kept that key for a few weeks. She continued to have a lot of sleepless nights and nightmares during that time. I had them too if I stayed the night, but when I was home I was perfectly fine. I can't remember how we decided on it, but one evening, while we were alone, we decided to set the key on the bottom stair going up to the attic as bait. We were going to close the door, open it really fast, and try to get a picture of a ghost. She was convinced that the ghost she saw in her room lived in the attic, and we were dumb 10-year-old kids, so frick it, why not try? We opened the door and set the key down. She took a control picture of the key, sitting right on the step, and we closed the door. When we tried to open it again, it would not open. Both of us pulled on the door with all of our little kid strength, but it would not budge. This went on for a few minutes, no clue how long, before the door finally opened, and the key was completely gone. We searched the stairs for almost an hour before we finally gave up. That night, we slept like babies. All of her nightmares went away, and she never mentioned seeing anything in a rocking chair again. As adults, we both rationalized that the other was pushing the door shut to scare us, and that one of us had actually hidden the key. We talked about it after we had both graduated high school, and were shocked to be told that no, it wasn't a prank by either of us. Still have no idea what happened that day, and neither of us ever saw that key again. Well, this might be the best example of a cursed item that I've ever heard. Case file number 2435, written by MMCC11. The house that came with a free mystery. My dad bought a house in 1965 for what he says was a steal at the time. It was built around 1920s and was huge, about 4,200 square feet in the West Hills. Yes, like the Everclear song. With an amazing view, right below the Pittock Mansion. He never knew why it was so cheap, but didn't ask too many questions. House was great except for the basement, that would flood in the winter with rainwater. His first marriage ended in early 70s, and he remained single for a few years. During this time, he claims that the FBI came to the house and asked him some questions about the basement. He told me they said a woman was found in the garage, just before he bought it. They assumed a self-deletion, and he thought this must be why the house was cheap. He told them it was empty when he moved in. He let them in and they searched the basement. He recalls they wouldn't tell him much, but the neighbors told him previous owners were involved in mischief, with lots of parties, fancy cars coming and going at all hours, and they would hang out at Henry Thiel's, a local restaurant. More on that in a moment. He married my mother in 1974, having me and my brother. In high school, I remember some men coming and saying something about Henry Thiel's being torn down, and they wanted to look in the basement again. They said they were FBI. My parents let them and explained it had been remodeled to fix the water issue. I left to go somewhere and didn't know what else they talked about. I never really thought about it again until years later. As I was growing up, my dad's 4 other kids were much older than me and moved out, while I was still very little. They were going to college, etc. His 2 boys sometimes stayed with us in summers, the girls did not. Mom and I always assumed the girls didn't like us. In the 80s, when I was about 10, my mom started having dreams about a shadowy male that would hover over her at night. She would wake up and it would still be there. She'd scream, fight, swing at it, and it would still not go away until my dad woke up. She would crawl to the foot of the bed and would follow her, keeping its face to hers, and disappear once my dad sat up. Side note, the floor plan of the house was very interesting with the master's wing. A single door led to a hallway with a separate sitting room, bathroom, and bedroom. The small hallway could be locked as well as reach the 3 rooms. The garage shared a wall along the master bedroom. A windowless attic above the garage shared a wall with 2 bedrooms upstairs. My parents discovered that if the door leading to the hallway was locked and the master bedroom at the end of the hall was locked, she would not have this dream. My dad tested this on occasion, sometimes purposefully and sometimes accidentally. They both swear 100% of the time, if just one door was left unlocked at any time before morning, she would have the experience. It had to remain locked when someone left the room, opened very briefly, to go down the short hallway to the bathroom at night, being locked behind them as they left with a key. The key could not remain in the door lock. And yes, of course, they were old-fashioned style keys. My extremely pacifist father also began keeping an axe under his side of the bed. Through the 80s, my mom went back to work and hired live-in nannies, who happened to be women. They would never work for us long. Their reasons were vague, but always about the creepy house. We assumed they were being nice as my brother needed special care, and was extremely challenging, and assumed they didn't want to say mean things about him. When I was a teenager, with this habit well established of locking doors, my aunt came to stay with us after having surgery. One morning, she apologized to my mom about how she must have woken up the entire house. She recounted the exact same experience. She awoke to a dark figure that she was absolutely sure was male, hovering above her. It remained there and didn't leave until she was exhausted from screaming. The guest room she stayed in bordered the garage. She had the experience every night until she left and never did again after that. As adults, my sisters and I became friends. Years ago, me in my 30s and one of my sisters in her 40s were having drinks, talking about the good old days, and I told her about the experience, as it had been shared with me over the years by women on my mom's side. I will never forget her face. She kept looking at her husband and back at me while I told her what I heard. When I was done, with a very pale face, she recounted her own stories. She told me how her mom had the same experience, and some other nights, her mom used to put tape under the chairs in the dining room at night with numbers written on them. She would check the chairs and find them out of order. She would reorganize them and find them moved the next day. The chairs were not scattered, just reorganized, but still tucked in. Children didn't play in the dining room and claimed to have never moved the chairs. My sister told me of her own shadow man story. She and her sister had the exact same experience. Her husband couldn't believe it either, as she had told him, and it was why they would never visit Dad and stay at that house until he retired and moved. Her husband always assumed it was some teenage nightmares and nonsense. The bedroom the sisters shared bordered the upstairs attic part of the garage. A small, almost half door led from the attic over the garage into the bathroom. The bathroom had 2 doors, one to the hallway and the nanny's room and guest room, and another to the sisters' bedroom. If the bathroom door or bedroom door was left unlocked, they would see the shadow man. A few years back, my wife and I were in Portland and decided to go by the old house. I knocked on the door and the owner answered and was nice enough to let us see the house. They had remodeled and she very nicely toured us through the entire home. And they did a lot of work. She seemed to enjoy showing it off. Eventually, we went upstairs and the small upstairs door to the garage attic was gone, a solid wall in its place. I tapped the wall and asked, "How do you get to the attic?" And the woman looked at me confused. I told her, "There's a hallway behind this wall. It goes over to the master bedroom, and into the attic and into the garage. The room is a good 20 by 30 feet. You can't miss it." She insisted there was no room. I assured her there was and told her how my brother and I would play in there and keep our Christmas stuff, old clothes and furniture. She got very skittish and then told us she needed to get going, so we'd have to go. We were hurried out. She was very polite, but clearly didn't want to keep talking. When we left, I looked up and you could see the hallway leading to the garage was still there from the outside. The siding of the house was clearly laid out for a hallway and a large room connected to the garage. It was easily 600, 700 square feet of hall and attic that they had walled off, and I can only assume it was to end the experience, or shadow man, as people called it. I'd really like to go back and see if anyone else had had any weird experiences. I would say I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe there is something very strange in that house in particular. I looked on Zillow, and it changed hands again. I wonder if anyone will discover and reopen the attic. It is obviously there. This almost has Jumanji vibes. Obviously no board game or magic involved, but it's just an old house that has so much history to it. But the Shadow Man doesn't appear to obey the typical non-laws of locality that other ghosts or spirits do, or he seems to be confined by physical matter. He can't break through a locked door. Very curious. Now time for the dad jokes of the day. I was fishing with my dad and not having a great time. I said to him, "My feet are wet and it smells terrible." "Yeah," my dad replied. "I'm in the same boat." On my way to work this morning, I yelled, "Cow!" at a woman riding a bicycle. She gave me the middle finger, told me to go to hell, and then plowed into the cow. This one is really good. A warning, not a description. I took my daughter to a pet store, where I looked over at the parrots. "Hey, could I get one of these for my daughter?" I asked the clerk. "Sorry, we only take cash, not trades." Bring back the barter system. I told my wife I'd like to be cremated, so she made an appointment for next Tuesday. Fred came home from university in tears. "Mom, am I adopted?" No, of course not, replied his mother. Why would you think such a thing? Fred showed her his genealogy DNA test results. No match for any of his relatives, and strong matches for a family who lived on the other side of the city. Shocked, his mother called her husband. Honey, Fred has done a DNA test and I don't know how to say this, he may not be our son. Well, obviously, he replied. What do you mean? She asked, confused. It was your idea in the first place, her husband continued. You remember that first night in the hospital when the baby did nothing but scream and cry, on, and you asked me to change him? Well, I picked a good one, I reckon. Ever so proud of Fred. I often wonder how often that happens. Does it happen where people switch out babies in the hospital? Not intentionally, just accidentally.